There is a quiet exhaustion that settles in your bones when you spend your life managing the emotional weather of other people. You know the feeling, the subtle tightening in your chest when a certain name appears on your phone, the heavy invisible armor you put on before entering a room, the lingering fatigue that follows an interaction, leaving you hollowed out as if a fraction of your life force has been silently siphoned away. We are taught from a young age that endurance is a virtue, that loyalty means standing in the storm even when the rain is acidic. We cling to relationships like frayed ropes, our hands bleeding from the friction because we are terrified of the silence that might follow if we simply let go. But what if your exhaustion is not a sign of your weakness? What if it is the desperate alarm bell of your own psychology, warning you that your inner sanctuary is being dismantled piece by piece from the inside? We rarely keep draining people in our lives out of genuine love. If we are brutally honest with ourselves, we keep them out of fear. We fear the guilt of walking away. We fear the accusations of abandonment. We fear the vast, terrifying, empty space that will appear when the drama, the friction, and the noise finally stop. This is not a manual on how to dominate your social circles, nor is it a guide to seeking revenge. This is about the quiet, unglamorous act of self-preservation. It is an exploration of the illusions that bind us to our own exhaustion and the silent, heavy doors we must learn to close. The ancient Stoics did not view human connection as a mandate to suffer fools or absorb toxicity. They understood a fundamental psychological truth: you are the average of the emotional atmospheres you willingly inhabit. Epictetus warned that if you continually rub shoulders with someone covered in dirt, you cannot help but get dirty yourself. He wasn't speaking of physical cleanliness, but of the psychological phenomenon of emotional contagion. When you surround yourself with chaos, your nervous system begins to mimic that chaos. You adopt the anxieties, the bitter resentments, and the frantic pacing of the people around you. Modern psychology calls this co-regulation. The Stoics called it the compromise of prohairesis, the surrender of your ruling faculty. When you allow someone else's unresolved trauma, malice, or anxiety to dictate your internal state, you're no longer a sovereign individual. You're a passenger in a vehicle driven by someone else's shadows. To walk the path of inner stillness, you must reclaim the steering wheel. This requires a profound philosophical shift, the realization that your peace is not a shared commodity. It is a fortified citadel, and you are the sole gatekeeper. Guarding that gate does not make you superior. It does not make you untouchable. It simply makes you responsible for your own mind. To take this responsibility, you must learn to recognize the quiet, subtle ways your autonomy is compromised. You must learn to identify the archetypes of exhaustion, and you must learn to walk away without a speech, without a trial, and without waiting for their permission. There are people who do not love you, but rather they love a very specific, outdated version of you. They are the archivists of your past. Perhaps they are old friends or even family members who knew you when you were more pliable, more chaotic, or more easily controlled. As you attempt to forge a philosophy of stillness, as you attempt to grow, you will notice a subtle, passive-aggressive resistance from them. Why do they do this? Because your evolution is a mirror reflecting their stagnation. Your attempt at discipline feels like a silent judgment of their lack of it. So they bring up your old mistakes. They subtly mock your new boundaries. They weaponize nostalgia to keep you tethered to a self you are desperately trying to shed. We stay with them because of the sunk cost fallacy. We think, but we have so much history. But history is not a contract for the future. You do not owe anyone the preservation of an old mask just because they are comfortable wearing it. Quietly cutting the archivist out is not a betrayal of the past. It is the refusal to let a dead version of yourself dictate your present. Notice the people in your life who are addicted to the crisis, the ones who treat every minor inconvenience as a catastrophic injustice. These are the merchants of panic. Whenever you speak to them, the world is ending. Everyone is against them. They are chronically outraged, perpetually wronged, and entirely externally validated. The danger of the merchant of panic is not just their negativity. It is their ability to hijack your nervous system. Through the guise of seeking support or venting, they are actually outsourcing their emotional regulation to you. They dump their psychological debris onto your lap and walk away feeling lighter, leaving you carrying a heavy, vibrating anxiety that does not belong to you. The illusion here is empathy. We believe that to be a good person, we must absorb their panic. But true empathy does not mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. To cut the merchant out is to understand the dichotomy of control. You cannot control their chaotic perception of the world, but you can entirely control your proximity to it. Some relationships are not built on affection, they are built on a ledger. These are the emotional creditors. With them, every favor is a loan with exorbitant interest. Every kind word is a transaction. They remember exactly what they did for you 3 years ago, and they keep that memory safely stored in their pocket, ready to be deployed the moment you attempt to set a boundary. The psychology behind the emotional creditor is rooted in control. By keeping you perpetually in their debt, they ensure your compliance. When you interact with them, you feel a lingering sense of guilt, a nagging feeling that you are somehow always falling short, always owing them an apology or a favor. The Stoic views human connection as an expression of virtue freely given. A gift with strings attached is not a gift. It is a trap. Quietly removing the emotional creditor requires walking away from the table entirely. Let them hold the ledger. Let them claim you are ungrateful. You must realize that their definition of gratitude is simply your submission. Pay the imaginary debt with your absence. This is perhaps the most difficult archetype to recognize because they disguise themselves as your biggest fans. They are the validators, the audience of your mask. These are the people whose approval you are addicted to. They only praise you when you are performing, when you are successful, when you are entertaining, or when you are useful to their status. The internal conflict here is entirely within your own ego. We keep them around because their applause temporarily numbs our own insecurities. But it is a Faustian bargain. To keep their approval, you must constantly curate your personality. You cannot be tired. You cannot be quiet. You cannot be flawed. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And there is no greater suffering than imagining how you are perceived by people who do not actually know the real you. When you cut out the audience, you are not punishing them. You are starving your own vanity. You are accepting the raw, unvarnished truth that it is better to be misunderstood in your authenticity than to be adored in your fabrication. Finally, there are the saboteurs of stillness, the architects of friction. These are the people who view your peacefulness as an insult. They thrive in arguments. They play devil's advocate not to find the truth but to extract an emotional reaction from you. They drop passive-aggressive comments just to watch you flinch. We often stay engaged with the architect of friction out of a misplaced desire for justice. We want to prove them wrong. We want to explain our position. We want them to finally understand us. We enter the courtroom of their ego, hoping for a fair trial. But the Stoic knows that the trial itself is the punishment. They do not want a resolution, they want the wrestling match. They want you down in the mud with them. Cutting them out requires the ultimate surrender of your ego. It requires letting them have the last word. Let them tell others that they won. Let them craft a narrative where you are the villain, the coward, or the fool. Your silence in the face of their provocation is not a defeat. It is the highest form of self-mastery. When you finally decide to walk this path, when you quietly drop the ropes and close the heavy doors, you must be prepared for the reality of what follows. There will be no triumphant music. There will be no immediate parade of inner peace. In fact, at first it will simply feel cold. When you stop managing the chaos of others, you are left alone with yourself. The noise of the merchants, the archivists, and the creditors used to distract you from your own mind. Now the silence will ring in your ears. You will face the uncomfortable truth that you allowed them in, that you tolerated the ledger, and that you wore the mask. People will notice your absence. Some will call you arrogant. Others will whisper that you have changed, that you have become cold or distant. Let them whisper. Do not try to correct their narrative. Do not send the long explanatory text message. Do not seek closure from the very people who kept you open and bleeding. Closure is a myth. The door is closed not when they understand, but when you simply stop walking through it. Your energy is finite. Your time is a vanishing commodity. The quiet power of the Stoic is not found in controlling the world, but in resigning from the games you were never meant to play. Look at your hands. Feel the invisible ropes you have been holding on to for years, the ones burning your skin. What happens if today you simply let go? Would you fall, or would you finally realize that you have been standing on solid ground all along?